Chapter 10. My name is... I fell asleep again in the car and didn't wake until the car hit a bump and jarred me from my trance-like slumber. It was very dark outside because an overcast sky kept the moon and the stars hidden. When I gazed out the window, I saw only my own reflected face in the glass. The face of someone so lost and confused. Her eyes were filled with question marks, her lips frozen in vain struggle to try to find some word, some thought to voice. I turned and looked at the woman in the nurse's uniform dozing beside me. Her eyelids fluttered as the automobile jerked and turned, but they didn't open. I gazed at the back of the driver's head and wondered who these people were and where I was going. Should I know? Had I been told? I struggled with the questions, but it was as if I had fallen into an echo chamber, because all I could hear were the questions coming back at me. The answers were like schools of fish, swimming in the opposite direction, far, far out of reach and uninterested in turning back. I could only watch them disappear, their scales glimmering for a moment, then gone, perhaps forever. My body was sore, yet I couldn't remember why that was either. It hurt to strengthen out my arms and legs, and the back of my neck felt as if someone with powerful fingers had grabbed it and squeezed it for hours. My eyes ached even when I kept them closed. I groaned and twisted, trying to make myself more comfortable, and the woman beside me woke with a quick jerk of her shoulders. She looked about, seemingly confused herself for a moment, then turned to me and smiled. "How are you, dear?" she asked. The driver turned a little but didn't look back at us. "I'm sore," I said. "Why am I so sore? Don't you remember anything about what happened to you? Why you're in pain?" I thought and thought, but it was like someone opening a book, finding only blank pages. I turned one after another and saw nothing written on any of them. I shook my head, my lips trembling, my tears feeling more like smoldering ashes under my eyelids. "Don't worry," she said. "It'll all come back to you someday." "It would be better for her if it don't," the driver muttered. "We'll be needing none of your comments," she snapped at the back of his head. "You're here to drive, nothing else," she said sternly. He cringed as if her words were actually slaps, and then he grunted and drove on silently. Suddenly there were lights ahead, cloaked in what looked like banks of fog. As we drew closer, I strained to make out the shape of what appeared to be an entryway to an estate. It was a very tall iron gate with a wide red brick column on each side. The light came from a large ball lamp atop each column. The driver slowed to a stop at the gate. "One moment, dear," the nurse said, patting me softly on the knee. She got out of the car. The fog twirled around us like smoke. I leaned forward to watch her poke numbers on the pad built into the side column on the right. The iron bars groaned loudly as the nurse returned to the car. "Where are we?" I asked. "Just relax, dear," she said in a reply. When the gate completely opened, we drove through and began to climb a winding hill. Climbing up out of the sea of fog. After the second turn, a 5-story gray brick and wood structure loomed over us, rising out of the darkness like the bow of a great ship. As we drew closer, it looked like a medieval castle because there was a huge cupola at the center of the roof. On both ends were dormers with windows that caught in the reflection of light below, cast by a tall pole lamps illuminating the parking lot. Most of the windows in the building were dark, but there were some dimly lit rooms on the first floor. When we turned into the parking space, I saw there was a cement stairway up the front of the entrance. It was really too dark to see much of the grounds, but I could make out some large weeping willow trees to the right. They looked like giants, with their heads bowed. "What is this place?" I asked. The sight of it had stirred no memory, recent or otherwise. "It's sort of a hospital," the nurse replied with a small but quick smile. The driver snorted. She glared at him a moment and then turned back to me. "You'll be well looked after here," she said. "Is this where I live?" I asked. "For now," she said. She got out and came around the car to open my door and help me out. The driver remained behind, slouching down and lowering his chin to his chest. The nurse knocked on the window and he lowered it. "I'm not going to be that long," she told him, but he didn't act as if he heard or cared. She turned back to me. "Come along, dear." She led me toward the stairs. There was an iron railing on the right, and I held onto it as we climbed the stairs because I felt a little dizzy. When we reached the front entrance, she pressed the buzzer and then looked at me and flashed another snapshot of a smile. The doors looked heavy and thick. They were tall and wide and had no windows. I leaned back and looked up at the roof. I thought I saw a bat fly from one end to the other. It was so quiet, and the air was very moist and enveloping. I could practically see the droplets of moisture dancing like small fairies around us. Off to the right, a streak of lightning sliced through the blackness and then instantly disappeared. My stomach felt as if it was filled with broken glass. I felt so lost, so detached, floating in space, longing for the pull of gravity to bring me back to Earth, back home, back to my name. We waited and waited. Finally, the door opened, and a lean man with hair that looked like it couldn't decide whether to be red or blonde stood before us. He too wore a white uniform. He looked very sleepy, his eyelids drooping. He seemed to be in his 20s, and he had freckles all over his cheeks. "Weren't you expecting us, Billy?" the nurse asked him gruffly. "What? Yeah, sorry, Clara," he said. "I fell asleep waiting," he added dryly. "Well, now that we're here, we'd like to come in," she said sharply. He stepped back quickly and we entered. Nothing looked familiar inside either. It was a large room with gray and blue cotton-covered sofas and chairs. There were about a half a dozen light maple wood tables. Only 3 small lamps in the large room were turned on, but I could see there wasn't much on the walls, just some paintings of ocean scenes with sailboats and fishing boats, a few paintings just of colors and rectangular shapes. The floor was dark wood with oval area rugs here and there, and at the far end there was a large fireplace made of fieldstone. The freckle-faced man, called Billy, looked at me for the first time, his gaze sweeping up from my feet to my face as if he were measuring me for something to wear. His eyes widened with a little more interest and alertness when I gave him a friendly smile. "This is her?" he asked, with his voice filled with surprise. "Of course it is. Who did you think it was?" "The new Miss America?" Clara quipped. He smirked. "She looks pretty good. I just thought Mrs. Miller said we should just show her to her room and get her to bed," he concluded once he saw the expression of impatience on Clara's face. "So let's do it," she said. "I don't have all night to dilly-dally with you." He turned and started toward the stairway, pausing at the bottom step. "She's going to be on the second floor. She can take care of her own basic needs, right?" She looks like she can, he added, gazing back at me. Why don't you leave the diagnosis and treatment to the doctors and just take her to her quarters? It's late and I'm tired too, Billy, Clara replied with more fatigue in her voice than anger this time. I'm just asking, he whined and started up the stairs. The nurse guided me up. We turned at the landing and went down a long hallway. The lights above were very bright, creating a glare off the gray tile floor. Occasionally the clean white walls were smudged here and there, and I saw what looked like squiggly lines that were made with dark crayons. Suddenly I heard someone wailing. Moments later I saw a woman and a man in white hurry through the corridor. That's Sarah Richards having another whopper of a nightmare, I bet, the young man said. The last time that happened, she scratched her face so badly they had to cut her nails and back to her knuckles. She's headed for upstairs, for sure, he predicted. Thanks for the cheerful news, Clara said. What was upstairs, I wondered. Billy paused at the doorway, reached for a set of keys hanging on his belt. He rifled through them, chose one, and opened the door. He switched on the light, and we entered. The first thing I noticed were the bars on the windows. How odd, I thought, for a hospital. Other than that, the room looked very pleasant. There was a very pretty blue and white curtains around the windows, with a pretty blue flowered wallpaper on the walls. The bed was a twin size, and it was looking comfortable. It had a light blue comforter and 2 plush pillows, with a thick dark mahogany headboard. Beside it were 2 matching nightstands, one on the right, which was a lampshade that looked like a ship lantern in brass. Across from the bed was a small dresser, and on the right there was a desk and a chair. There was a cushioned blue and white patterned chair between the 2 windows. On the wall across from the bed was a painting of a garden with lawn furniture. The word impressionist came to mind, shooting out of some dark closet, followed by the face of someone I should be able to remember. Was it a teacher, a friend, family? It was gone too quickly for me to come to any conclusion. Isn't this nice, Clara said. Yeah, you know the facilities here are quite good when you consider, Billy said before I could respond. Consider what? Clara asked. He shrugged. Most of them don't even know where the hell they are anyway, he said. You've got a great attitude, Billy. Mr. Sensitivity himself. He laughed. I just call it like it is, he said. Spare me, Clara told him, and he laughed again. Clara crossed the room and opened the closet. There was what looked like a hospital worker's powder blue uniform dangling from a hanger, and a pair of white terry cloth slippers beneath it. Other than that, the closet was empty. All right, she said to Billy, I'll settle her in. What about the paperwork, he asked. I'll be down in a little while to take care of it. Just have it ready for me. Aye, aye, Captain, he said with a mock salute. He gazed at me, then nodded at her. Good, he said, as if I had done something difficult but merely walking in and up the stairs. He turned to me again before leaving. What's her name? She hesitated a moment as if she'd forgotten it. Then she said, Lauren. Lauren, I thought. That didn't sound right. No, that's not my name, I said. Her eyes widened and her eyebrows curled up. Oh, you remember your name? I thought, and then I shook my head. So how do you know it's not Lauren? She asked. I stared at her, then at him. He was wearing a wide, silly grin. I just know, I faltered. Until you remember your name, that's your name, she replied dryly. Now, Lauren, she said, pronouncing it empathetically, so I would not contradict her again. Come over here and get into this. She took the shirt and pants off their hangers and handed them to me. You should get settled in and get some sleep. Tomorrow's a big day for you. Yeah, the first day is always the hardest, Billy commented. Clara turned to Billy, shooting him an angry look. He flashed her another smile and then at me and left quickly. I got into the shirt and pants while she turned down my bed. The sheets smelled freshly starched and the blanket felt brand new. Comfortable, she asked me and tucked me in and arranged my pillow under my head. Yes, but I still ache all over. Why can't I remember what happened to me? Was I in some sort of accident, a car accident? Did I fall? Tomorrow the doctor will see you, and then we'll see what can be done to help you make you more comfortable, she said instead of answering my question. In the morning, another nurse, the head nurse, Mrs. Klinkner, will show you around and take you to breakfast. You're going to be fine, she added. How long will I be here, I asked. She stared at me a moment. I don't think you'll be here as long as your grandmother thinks, she said. My grandmother? I thought about that small elderly lady back at the house. That woman was my grandmother? Why was she so angry and mean to me? Never mind now, she said quickly, as if she'd already told me too much. There's plenty of time to work on your return. Return? From where? She thought a moment. From oblivion, I guess, she said. She paused and looked at me, a small smile on her lips. Can't you remember anything about yourself? How old are you? Any member of your family? Anything? I closed my eyes and tried to remember, and I shook my head. Everything is so muddled. I hear voices and see quick flashing pictures, but it's like my mind is full of bubbles that keep bursting when I try to seize them. I replied. She laughed. You'll be fine. She patted my hand. Get some sleep. Will I see you again? I asked quickly, as she turned and started for the door. No, I don't work here. I work for a doctor who has patients here, she replied from the doorway. My doctor? I asked. No, not exactly, she said. Don't worry about all those details. Just do what they tell you to do and you'll get better sooner than you think, she said. For now, what you need the most is rest. I know I want to go home, I said, but I just can't remember where that is. She smiled warmly. You will, someday, she said. Then she looked sad. Goodbye, Lauren. She switched the lights off. She closed the door behind her, and I heard the distinctive click of a lock. Trying to forget that I had just been locked into my room, I lie there in the darkness listening. Through the walls I could hear someone crying softly. Above me there were footsteps moving rapidly. Then a deep, long silence soon filled the sounds of creaking walls and floors, and the slam of a door and more footsteps. Why was I here? Why did Clara call that old lady my grandmother? She didn't act like a grandmother, I thought. Why wouldn't Clara tell me more? Who told her to call me Lauren? Maybe that was my name. I closed my eyes. All these questions and thoughts were giving me a headache. A myriad of faces flashed against the insides of my eyelids, some smiling, some laughing, a young man looking serious, and someone began to whisper. I struggled to hear what he was saying, but his voice drifted back till there was only silence and blackness. I was so tired. Clara was right. I needed rest. Maybe in the morning I would remember who I was. All my questions would be answered and this would be over. For now, that was my only prayer. I woke up when the door to my room was thrust open with such force and abruptness it sent waves through the air. A much older nurse than Clara stepped in carrying a package under her arm. Her hair was dirty gray and old silver coins and strands cut just below her earlobes. It looked thin and harsh as wire. Her forehead had rows of deep wrinkles that exploded at her temples, and it produced spidery webs extending to her cheeks. Her cheeks were a bit puffy, making her small, wide nose look like it was sinking into her face and would soon get swallowed up by those cheeks. She had a thin, uneven mouth, the right corner of her lower lip dipping just enough to reveal some teeth. The roundness of her face fit her chunky, short body, yet she had long arms with wide hands and thick fingers. She paused, breathing in and lifting her hefty bosom as she contemplated me for a moment. I thought she looked like a pigeon with her chest out as she strutted to the bed. She placed the package at my feet. Her appearance had startled me so that my heart thumped. As soon as I regained my senses, I sat up and gazed about in confusion, trying to remember how and when I had been brought here. The soreness in my body had gone deep into my muscles. My arms felt heavier, and just the thought of standing was exhausting. "Good, you're awake," the new nurse said. She went to the windows, and when she turned her back to me, I saw she had a rather prominent birthmark at the base of her skull. She opened the curtains wider to let in more light. I could see the clear blue sky. She spun on me, her hands on her hips. "I'm Mrs. Kleckner," she said. "I'm the head nurse here. Your bathroom has all you need in it. You'll find a toothbrush, toothpaste, a new hairbrush, soap, shampoo in the cabinet. Can you get up and give yourself a shower this morning, or do I have to take you to the special bathroom for the disabled?" "I think I can do it myself," I said. She approached the bed. "Hold out your hands," she ordered. "Go on." I did what she asked, and she watched them tremble, and then she turned them over and watched them again. "Touch the tip of your nose," she commanded. "Do it," she said when I didn't move quickly enough. After I'd done that, she took my pulse, looked at my eyes, and then stepped back. "Do you remember why you were brought here? Do you remember how you were brought here?" she asked before I could answer the first question. "I came in a car. There was another nurse named Clara. She said that I had been with my grandmother." I looked up. "The nurse kept calling me Lauren, but I don't think that's my name," I said. "Really? Then what is your name?" I thought for a moment, but I couldn't think anything that sounded right. "I know it's not Lauren," I said. "That's nice. You know it's not Lauren. You know it's not Susan, too. And you know it's not Joyce. And you know it's not Matilda, I bet." She rattled with a smirk. "You probably know you're not 50 or 60, 70 names, but do you know how old you are?" "How old? I can't remember," I said. "Why can't I remember my own age and my own name?" My lips started to tremble. She nodded, as if confirming what she thought to be true. "A shower is the way to begin the day. There are clothes for you in this package," she said, indicating what she had brought with her. "Underthings, socks, a pair of shoes, a shirt, and a blouse. Other things are being brought here for you today. First, I'll show you to the cafeteria and you'll have breakfast. After that, you'll meet Dr. Sotheby and have your first session. I understand that you've had some trauma on your arms and legs," she said, and drew closer. She lifted the blanket away from me. "Lower those pants," she ordered. I started to do so, and once again I didn't move quickly enough to satisfy her. She finished lowering them herself and inspected the bruises on my thighs and my calves, as well as my hips and ribs. "You did take a beating," she remarked. She lifted the shirt over my head so roughly I cried out, "My arms and shoulders!" She held my arm and inspected the black and blue marks. When she released it, I studied my hands and forearms too. My fingers looked scabby where the skin had been peeled away. What could I have done to myself? What happened to me? I moaned, near tears. You'll be fine, she said dryly, lifting the right corner of her mouth so it put a bulge into her cheek. This will go away in time. But I don't understand. How did this happen to me? I asked her. She didn't smirk exactly. She pressed her lips together, puffed her cheeks out a bit more, and made her eyes small. It's your responsibility to tell us, she said. When you do, you'll be on your way to recovery. What's wrong with me? I asked in a shrill voice. Why can't I remember anything about myself? No one wants to tell me anything, please. The doctor will tell you all about that. My job is to get you ready to see that your basic needs are met first, she said. She was clearly unmoved with my emotional outburst. Then she fixed her eyes on me. I'll warn you now, she continued, stepping back, folding her thick arms under her heavy bosom. Her elbows looked dry and skin scaly, like a fish. This is not a 5-star hotel. I don't want to hear complaints about the food or the service or the size of your room. I don't want to hear how we don't have enough to entertain you. I'm a nurse. I'm not a camp counselor for the wealthy, spoiled children. Am I wealthy? Spoiled? I fired back. I thought she almost smiled. That's something you'll have to learn for yourself. The plan is for you to make your own discoveries about yourself, with our help, of course. That's how you'll get better. My telling you everything I know doesn't help you. I don't understand. Where am I asked. Where are you? You're in a mental clinic, my dear, she said. A mental clinic? One of the best in the state, if not the best. And very exclusive, too. Now take your shower. I'll be back in 20 minutes and I expect to see you dressed and ready for breakfast. There's no reason why you can't do it yourself. I have a few patients on this floor who really do need my assistance, and I must go to them now. My lips started to tremble. I thought my whole body would soon shudder uncontrollably. She saw something was about to happen and stepped closer. Get a hold of yourself, she ordered. She put her hands on my upper arms and shook me. I don't permit any of my patients to sit in their rooms and feel sorry for themselves. The quicker you get better, the quicker you get out of here, she said, and make room for someone else who really needs us. Shower, she concluded, and pivoted on her soft shoes and marched out of the room, closing the door behind her. I took a deep breath. Remember, I chanted. Try to remember, please. If you remember, you can go home. I squeezed my eyes closed and searched my brain, but it was as if my shouts for help were locked in some small part of my mind, shut up and smothered. I looked down at my hands and my feet, seeing some mark, something that could stir my memory. Nothing happened. I sighed with the frustration, rose and took off the shirt and pants and went into the bathroom. There was a mirror over the small sink and I stared at my face, bringing my fingers to my lips, my nose, even touching my eyes. I was like a blind person trying to identify someone through my fingers, but what I felt and what I found rang no bells. I leaned in to take a close look at my reflection. I was looking at my face of a complete stranger. It's like I had been dropped into someone else's body. Who are you? I asked the image in the mirror and waited. Suddenly I heard a roaring in my ears. A memory flashed. A memory of holding a seashell to my ear and listening. The ocean's in there, someone was saying. I sensed I was just a little girl. Look inside. Do you see it? I closed my eyes. There were smiling faces, and there was laughter, and there was an ocean in the seashell. Everyone who looked at me smiled. Who am I? I screamed at them, but they just continued to smile. Who am I? I directed my screaming at the image in the mirror, and the image just screamed back. I don't know how long I went on before Miss Kletchner returned. She spun around with those strong hands of hers, and she slapped me sharply across the face, and I stopped. "What are you doing? You frightened some of the other patients." "I don't remember my name," I wailed. "I don't know who I am. I don't know who this is in the mirror. I'm scared. I feel like I'm dangling in space. It's terrifying," I cried. "Don't be ridiculous. You're safe here. You're not dangling. Now, didn't I tell you to take a shower and get dressed? You'll see the doctor this morning and your therapy will begin. Now get in that shower," she said, and she reached over to turn it on. "Go on, get in and stop this nonsense now. No one's gonna pamper you. You have to cure yourself and help yourself." She glared at me. "It'll do better for you if you cooperate," she said, not cloaking her threats. I ground the tears away and stepped in the shower, adjusting the water so it wasn't scalding hot as she had it. She waited a moment and then left me alone. Despite the shower, I felt deeply exhausted after drying off. It took great effort to dress and get my socks and shoes on. Where did this clothing come from, I wondered? Was it mine? Everything did fit well. The door opened again. Miss Clincher stood there inspecting me. "Good," she said. "Come along, I'll show you the eating facilities now. And tomorrow morning you'll get yourself up and go to breakfast on your own. Understand?" "Do you understand?" she repeated when I didn't answer quickly enough. "Yes," I said. "This way." She turned and I joined her. We walked down the corridor toward the stairway. A tall, dark-haired girl was ahead of us. She didn't glance our way, but instead bounced happily down the steps, waving her hands as if she were sweeping cobwebs away from her head. Miss Clincher sighed so deeply and shook her head, but said nothing. We started down the stairs. The dark-haired girl was already down and away. I was moving too slowly to satisfy Miss Clincher, so when we reached the bottom of the stairs, she seized my hand and jerked me along. "It's time to wake up," she declared, and forced me to stride step for step alongside her until we reached the long doorway, from which I could hear dishes and silverware clinking and the voices in low but continuous murmur, punctuated by some laughter. When we turned in the doorway and entered the cafeteria, everyone stopped talking and looked at us. There was little more than a dozen people, all looking relatively my age, whatever the exact age was. The dark-haired girl who had been sweeping the air around her descended the steps and broke into a long, shrill laugh. She was at the counter getting her food from a sweet-looking elderly lady in a white uniform. "Quiet," Miss Clincher cried. The dark-haired girl stopped with such abruptness I couldn't help but be impressed with Miss Clincher's authority. All eyes were on us now. There was a boy close by who didn't look much more than 10 or 11, gazing at me with a small smile on his lips. Sitting at his table was a tall, very thin girl with hair the color of ripe apricots. She had big dark eyes and a mouth with soft, perfect lips. Her cheekbones were clearly visible under her tissue-like skin, which was pale and thin enough to pass for transparent. I saw how thin her arms were, too. Despite her fragile appearance, she sat up straight and firm and looked at me with a soft, friendly air. Across from her, his eyes down, was a handsome young man with hair as dark and shiny as black pearl. He wore it brushed neatly on the sides and long down the back of his neck. For a moment I thought of someone else. The name almost appeared, but when this boy flashed a quick, timid look at me, I forgot the face in my memory and smiled back at him. "We have a new resident," Miss Clincher said. "Hooray for her," a chubby boy with blonde hair cried. The two boys at his table laughed, but then stopped, as if they could turn it on and off like a television set, their faces moving from comedy to tragedy in a split second. "That's enough of that, Carlton," Miss Clinchner chastised. He laughed silently, his cheeks jiggling, and then suddenly he looked as if he was going to cry. I glanced at Miss Kletchner, who didn't seem to notice or care. "Her name," she continued, "is Laura." I turned and looked at her, seeing a small smile on her face. All along she knew I had been right. The other nurse had mistakenly called me Lauren and not Laura, but I had been unable to remember. However, even though I sensed Laura was my real name, I couldn't connect it with anything else, especially a surname. "I want you all to make her feel at home here," Miss Clinchner added. "Home sweet home," someone in the back muttered. The dark-haired girl by the corner suddenly spun around, and then spun around again as if she were dancing ballet. One of the attendants nearby moved quickly to her side and seized her hand. He spoke with her quietly, and she gazed at the door. When I looked to the right, I noticed a female attendant feeding a boy who looked to be at least 12 or 13. She encouraged him to feed himself, but he merely stared ahead, opened his mouth and chewing mechanically as she scooped food in and wiped his lips. "Go to the counter and get what you want," Miss Clinchner said. "There's juice, cereals, and eggs if you like. Mrs. Anderson is our cook. She can make something special if you need that. You can sit where you'd like," she added. I crossed the cafeteria, feeling all eyes on me. The dark-haired girl had been moving along and sat with the attendant at her side. She sipped on a glass of orange juice and stared ahead. "Hello, Laura," Mrs. Anderson said. She had a wonderfully happy smile, her eyes bright and cheery. "Would you like scrambled eggs this morning?" "Yes," I said, "thank you." I suddenly realized I was very hungry. I chose the grapefruit juice and plucked a roll from the basket. Mrs. Anderson scooped the eggs on a plate and put a piece of melon beside them. "Enjoy your breakfast with us," she said. "Thank you." I took the plate, put it on the tray, and turned. Many of the other residents were still staring at me, but a number had gone to their own breakfasts and conversations. Someone absolutely terrified me. Terrified that I would stop their tables as I made my way through the room. "Sit here, you'll be safe," a pretty red-haired girl said. There's another shorter, younger girl with her. The younger girl wore jeans, a jean skirt, and a frilly white blouse. Her blonde hair was tied in two long, thick pigtails. "Thank you," I said, and took the empty seat at their table. "My name's Megan Paxton," the red-headed girl said. She had a button nose and a small mouth. Her eyes darted about as if she expected trouble. "I'm Laura," I said, confident of that little bit of information. "Laura what?" the younger girl asked. She looked like a doll because of her tiny features. "I can't remember my full name," I said. "I can't remember anything," I admitted, as if it were a crime and this was a jail instead of a clinic. "Around here, that's an average," Megan said. "You're lucky," she said dryly. "I can't forget anything." "When did you arrive?" "Sometime last night, I think," I said. "It all seems fuzzy in my head." I drank my juice. Megan darted her eyes about again. I began to look in the direction she was serving to see if there was something I should notice too. "Is something wrong?" I asked. "I'm just waiting to see if he's still here." "They claim," she said, widening her eyes and hoisting her eyebrows, "that they fired him yesterday." "Who?" "Garson Taylor, one of the attendants. He tried to rape me," Megan said. "Really?" "Of course, really," she snapped. "What do you think, I'm making it up?" "Well, do you?" She drove at me, her face full of fire, her eyes wide. "No, I'm sorry. I'm just surprised by what you said." "Well, don't be surprised. Be alert. All the men here have one thing on their mind, and you don't have to take 2 guesses to figure out what it is either, she said. When they look at you, they're looking through your clothes. That's terrible. Tell me about it. She considered me a moment. Maybe you were raped, she said, and it's too traumatic, and that caused you to forget everything. That's very common, she nodded, firmly convinced in her diagnosis. I stopped eating and gazed at her. I started to shake my head. Why are you shaking your head? You said you don't remember anything. I'll bet that's what it is. Right, Lulu? She asked. The young girl, the small girl nodded. Yes, Megan, she said obediently. Megan looked satisfied. Her name isn't really Lulu. I named her that, Megan explained with a smile. That's because she's a real Lulu, right, Lulu? The small girl laughed. My daddy's coming here to see me today, she said. Oh, will you stop? She's been saying that for 2 years. Her father doesn't even write her letters, Megan said. You'd think that she'd understand, face reality by now. Yes, he does. Okay, Lulu, believe what you want. Fathers are the biggest liars of all anyway, Megan said. Can you remember your father, she asked me. No, I said. He's the one that raped you then, Megan threw back at me. I nearly choked on my eggs. I never said I was raped. Of course you didn't, but it's a very logical reason why you can't remember. She leaned over to whisper, Be very careful after you've gone to bed. They have all the keys to the doors, she said, leaning back. That's how Garson Taylor got into my room. Fortunately, I was able to shout loudly enough to bring in others. He claimed he wasn't even in my room. Can you imagine? She looked almost nervously again, then turned back to me, her haunted eyes wild and full of alarm. If he's still here, we're all in danger, especially a new girl like you. Watch the doctors too, she added. The doctors? Why? They like to touch you here all the time, she said, touching her small breasts and pretend it's necessary. She stared at me, then bit down on her lower lip so hard I thought she would draw blood. You'll be all right, she said. We'll all be all right someday, right, Lulu? What? Yes. My daddy's coming today, she told me. He's gonna take me home. I'm happy for you, I said. Oh, spunks, Megan said. Let's go to the rec room. We can listen to some music and talk. We can't just leave and go there. We can just leave and go there, I asked. We can do anything we want, she declared. We're paying the rent. At least you know this much about yourself, Laura. You're rich. I am? Of course you are, stupid. It costs $40,000 a year to stay here. I sat back amazed. I didn't realize, I said. Just don't let any of them take advantage of you. You don't have to put up with any of it. She gazed at the door. If he's still working here, I'm going to raise bloody hell, she said. Then she gazed at my plate. Finish your breakfast. We've got things to talk about, she ordered. I've got to make you aware of all the dangers.